The red dust of Willow Creek settled on everything. It coated the weathered boards of the saloon and turned the horizon into a hazy line between earth and sky. In 1882, this small frontier town was a place built on dust and disappointed dreams. And in Morrison's boarding house, Emma Hartley was hiding a secret. She wiped down the scarred wooden tables, her movements precise. She kept her sleeves rolled down despite the afternoon heat. When old Pete Henderson reached out to pat her shoulder, she stepped back smoothly, as if she'd merely turned to fetch the coffee pot. "Peculiar girl," Pete muttered. "Been here near 2 years now? Still jumpy as a Mustang." Emma heard the whispers. She always did. She kept her head down, her world confined to the invisible boundaries she built around herself. A wall no one was allowed to cross. Then the boarding house door swung open with a bang that made her flinch. A group of cowboys, dusty from the trail, filled the doorway. Their leader stepped forward, his hat in his hand. A polite gesture. "Name's Jack Kavanaugh," he said, his voice deep and steady. "My men and I just brought in some horses from Colorado." Emma kept her back turned, busying herself with a coffee pot. She saw him from the corner of her eye, tall, lean, with sun-weathered features. But it was his eyes that caught her. They were steady and watchful, but without the calculating look she'd learned to fear. "Mrs. Morrison's at the general store," she said, her voice quiet. "Appreciate it," he said, moving to a table near the window, a seat that let him see both the door and the street. A cautious man. "That coffee I smell?" Emma nodded, reaching for a clean cup. As she approached his table, she saw his hands resting on the worn wood, scarred and capable, but relaxed. She set the cup down quickly, pulling back before their fingers could accidentally touch. Jack noticed. Of course he did, but he didn't comment. He just poured the coffee himself. "Thank you, Miss Emma," she whispered, surprised she'd offered her name. "Miss Emma," he repeated. "You been in Willow Creek long?" 2 years come September. Like it? The question was simple, but his tone was genuine. It wasn't just idle chatter. "It's, far from everything," she said. Jack nodded slowly. "Sometimes that's what a person needs." Their eyes met for just a moment, and in his gaze she saw an understanding that terrified her. It felt like he could see right through the wall she'd built. Later, one of his men, younger and smelling of whiskey, grabbed for her wrist. "How about some company tonight, pretty girl?" Emma jerked back so violently she knocked over a chair. The crash silenced the room. She stood frozen, her face pale, breathing hard as the whispers started. The strange girl, the one who can't bear to be touched. "Thompson," Jack's voice cut through the tension like a blade. "Outside. Now." The young cowboy stumbled out. "I apologize for him, Miss Emma," Jack said quietly. "It won't happen again." Emma only nodded, her hands shaking as she righted the chair. That evening, she stood on the back porch, trying to calm her racing heart. She didn't hear Jack approach until he spoke. "I sent Thompson to sleep in the stable," he said. "Told him if he so much as looks at you wrong, he'll be walking back to Colorado." Emma gripped the railing. "You didn't have to." "Yes, I did. A man's got to respect boundaries whether he understands them or not." The word boundaries hung in the air. Emma felt tears prick her eyes. "People think I'm strange," she whispered. "People think a lot of things." "Doesn't make 'em true," Jack said, leaning against the far railing, keeping that careful distance. "We all got our reasons for being how we are." The words escaped before she could stop them, a confession she'd never made to a living soul. "I'm afraid to be touched." Jack didn't flinch. He didn't offer pity. He just nodded slowly, as if she'd told him the sky was blue. "Then I'll hold your heart first," he said simply. Emma's breath caught. The words should have been a line, a cowboy's trick. But the way he said them, quiet and sure, they felt like a promise. A promise he had no idea how impossible it was to keep. Because Jack Kavanaugh couldn't possibly know what had happened 2 years ago. He couldn't know about the fire, the screams, and the men who had stolen her voice and shattered her world. He couldn't know that the heart he promised to hold was a fortress, and its gates had been sealed shut for good. The nightmare always began with the smell of smoke. Then her mother's scream, cut short. Emma woke with a gasp, her nightgown damp with sweat. 2 weeks had passed since Jack arrived. 2 weeks of careful, quiet conversations. He never pressed. He never tried to cross her boundaries. He just offered his presence, a steady, calming force in her chaotic world. But the nightmares were getting worse. She dressed in the pre-dawn darkness, forcing the memories back. She was 17. Raiders at their homestead near Topeka. Her father shot on the porch. The door splintering. Chaos. Terror. She shook her head, focusing on the rhythm of making breakfast. Biscuits, bacon, coffee. The routine was her anchor. You're up early, even for you. Emma startled, but didn't drop the eggs this time. Jack stood in the doorway. Couldn't sleep, she admitted. Makes two of us. He moved to his usual table. Mind if I ask you something? Emma tensed. Depends on what it is. Fair enough, he said. Was wondering if you might like to learn to shoot. The eggs slipped from her hands, splattering on the floor. Her mind flashed to a memory. Cruel hands. A cold voice saying she'd never need to defend herself because she'd never get the chance. I'm sorry, Jack said quickly. Didn't mean to upset you. She knelt, cleaning the mess. Why would you teach me that? Because knowing how to protect yourself and being afraid are two different things, he said. Sometimes the knowing helps with the afraid part. She looked up at him. He was leaning forward, his steady gaze full of an understanding that made her ache. I had a gun once, she whispered. Couldn't make myself use it when it mattered. You were young, scared, no shame in that. I wasn't just scared, she said, the words flat and emotionless. They held me down. While my mother, she couldn't say it, couldn't make it real again. Jack's hands clenched on the table, the only sign of his anger. How long before help came? 3 days. She stood, her voice hollow. They left when they heard cavalry. By then, Mama was gone. Fever. I tried to help her, but I couldn't stand to touch her. She gestured helplessly at herself, at the body that had become a prison. The marshal found me in the root cellar, took me to town. Everyone was so kind. Her laugh was a bitter, broken sound. So kind they couldn't look me in the eye. They gave me money to go somewhere new, start fresh. So you came here, Jack finished. So I came here. And I swore no one would ever touch me again. The kitchen was silent, but for the sizzle of new eggs in the pan. My brother died because he couldn't defend himself, Jack said finally. Not wouldn't, couldn't. He was simple-minded. Sweet as sunshine. Some men in a saloon thought it was funny to make him dance by shooting at his feet. He fell wrong, hit his head. The old guilt was a stone in his voice. I taught myself to shoot after that. Not for revenge, just to never be that helpless again. He met her eyes. That's all I'm offering, Emma. Knowledge, choice, nothing more. Something shifted in her chest. A small, tentative flicker of something that wasn't fear. All right, she said softly. That afternoon, they walked out to a muddy watering hole past the edge of town. Jack showed her his Colt .45. He explained each part, his voice calm and patient. Emma watched from a safe distance, arms wrapped tight around herself. Will you show me? She asked. His draw was a smooth, fluid motion. 6 shots, 6 bottles exploding into dust. It's not about being fast, he said, reloading. It's about being sure. Emma stepped closer, drawn in despite herself. Could I hold it? Jack set the gun on a flat rock and stepped back, giving her space. Her hands shook as she reached for it. The metal was warm from the sun, heavier than she'd imagined. She lifted it, feeling its weight, its power. She raised the gun, sighting down the barrel. Her finger stayed clear of the trigger, but she imagined it. Imagined having this power that night. Tears streamed down her face, but her hand stayed steady. I couldn't save her, she whispered. You saved yourself, Jack said from behind her. That took more courage than any shooting. She lowered the gun, setting it back on the rock. When she turned, he was there, his eyes full of a respect that felt more healing than any pity. As they walked back to town, the prairie stretched around them, vast and unforgiving. But for the first time in 2 years, it didn't feel like a place to hide. It felt like a place to learn to live again. That evening, when she refilled Jack's coffee, she let her fingers brush the handle of the pot just as his hand reached for it. Not touching, but close. closer than she had let anyone come in so very long. "Same time tomorrow?" he asked quietly. "Yes," Emma said, and this time she meant it. She didn't know it yet, but that small step was leading her toward a confrontation she never saw coming. A man from her past was riding toward Cheyenne, a man with a badge and a dark, predatory interest in her secrets. The drought settled over Willow Creek like a curse. 3 weeks of blistering heat turned the town to a powder keg of tension and thirst. Emma watched Jack carefully ration water for his horses at the communal trough, a discipline that marked him as a leader. Thompson, the cowboy Jack had disciplined, had been talking, spreading rumors about Emma. Jack's jaw was tight when he told her. "I've warned him twice," he said, his voice low. "Won't be a third time." Emma shivered despite the heat. She'd fled one town because of whispers. The thought of running again was a bitter pill. "Should I? Should you what? Run again?" Jack's voice was fierce. "You've done nothing wrong, Emma. Nothing." He took a breath, softening his tone. "Walk with me. To the edge of town and back. Public as can be." So they walked, Emma with her water bucket, Jack leading his horse. The whole town watched. Some nodded. Others whispered. In front of the saloon, Thompson watched them pass, a sneer on his face. Jack's hand moved casually to his gun belt, and Thompson looked away. At the edge of town, the prairie stretched endlessly. "My family lost our ranch in Texas," Jack said, his voice laced with old guilt. "My father died of shame. A year later, my brother—" He told her the story again, the raw pain still fresh. "I was his protector, and I failed." He looked at her. "Just like you think you failed your mother." The parallel hit her hard. "That's different." "Is it? We both carry the guilt of being the one who lived." A shout from town broke the moment. A fight at the saloon. "Duty calls," Jack sighed. He handed his horse's lead to Emma without thinking. She took it automatically, her fingers brushing his. She froze. The horse nudged her, and she found herself stroking its neck, the feel of something warm and alive under her palm. It was the first living thing she'd willingly touched in 2 years. She waited, holding the horse, as Jack's calm voice diffused the fight. He emerged a few minutes later, a fresh bruise on his cheek. "You're hurt." "Thompson swings wild when he's drunk." "It's nothing." "It's not nothing." Before she could stop herself, her hand was in the air, reaching for his face. She stopped just short, her fingers trembling. Jack went perfectly still. "Emma!" She snatched her hand back. "I'm sorry, I didn't—" "Don't apologize, not for that, not ever." Thompson stumbled out of the saloon then, breaking the spell. That night, Emma lay in bed, remembering the heat of Jack's skin so close to her fingers. The next morning, she brought him coffee, and with it, a small jar of salve. "For the bruising," she said. Jack picked it up. "Will you show me how to apply it?" She knew what he was asking. It wasn't about the salve. It was another step across the chasm between them. I I could try," she whispered. "That's all anyone can do," he said softly. "Try." As the morning sun slanted through the window, Emma dipped her fingers in the salve and reached out. This time, when her fingertips brushed his bruised cheek, she didn't pull away. It was the lightest touch, barely there, but it was everything. A clap of thunder rumbled in the distance, a promise of rain. And in the quiet kitchen, two broken souls found a flicker of healing. But they had no idea another storm was coming. A man wearing a marshal's badge was riding into Cheyenne, and he was bringing Emma's worst nightmares with him. The rain came that night, a deluge that washed the dust from the air and turned the streets to mud. It felt like a cleansing, a new beginning. "We'll be leaving soon," Jack said as they stood on the back porch, watching the storm. "Work's waiting in Wyoming." The words hit Emma like a physical blow. 3 days. He'd be gone in 3 days. "Don't make this harder," she whispered. "Harder than what?" he asked, his voice raw. "Than pretending I don't care about you? Than riding away and acting like you're not the first thing I think about in the morning and the last at night?" He saw the tears on her face. "Come to Wyoming with me, Emma. Not as anything you're not ready for, but just come. You could find work. I'd be nearby." Jack, I can barely let you touch my hand. I'm a grown man, and I choose you, Emma Hartley, he said fiercely. Today, tomorrow, however long it takes. A gust of wind drove the rain sideways. Jack shrugged out of his coat and held it out. Emma stepped forward, letting him drape it around her shoulders. His hands never touched her skin, but she felt his warmth surround her. I need time to think. Take all you need, he promised. I'll wait. The next morning she found him in the stable. I have conditions, she said, her voice shaking but firm. My own room, my own work. And this, it goes at my pace. No expectations. Understood, Jack said, his smile like a sunrise. She fled before he could see her joyful tears. 3 days later, she was on a wagon train heading north, leaving Willow Creek behind. Jack rode beside the wagon, his presence a quiet promise. She was leaving one life, but she wasn't running anymore. She was riding toward a future. Cheyenne was a bustling railroad town, a world away from Willow Creek. Emma found work at the Grand Hotel in a small room of her own. Jack took a job on a nearby ranch. For 3 months, a new, fragile peace settled over her. Their friendship deepened. The touches became less frightening, the silences more comfortable. Then she saw him, a tall man in a black coat, dismounting in front of the sheriff's office. The badge on his vest gleamed in the sun. A deputy marshal. His eyes, pale blue and cold as a winter sky, swept the street and landed on her window. Her blood froze. He wasn't the same man from Kansas, but he was the same kind. That night he walked into the hotel dining room and sat in her section. Marcus Wheeler, he said, his smile never reaching his eyes. Deputy Marshal out of Denver. You seem familiar, miss. Have we met? No, sir, Emma managed. But his presence became a constant torment. He'd appear in hallways, blocking her path, his questions like tiny needles. You remind me of a girl I knew in Kansas, he said one night. Poor thing suffered terribly. Ran off before we could catch the men who did it. There's still a reward, you know, if you remember anything. He knew. Somehow he knew. When she told Jack, his fury was a cold, hard thing. I'll talk to him. No, Jack. He's a marshal. You can't. But Wheeler escalated. He started telling stories at dinner, loud enough for the whole room to hear, about damaged women and the fools who took up with them. That night, Jack was waiting for her outside. Pack your things. We're leaving. Running makes me look guilty, Jack. Guilty of what? Surviving? Well, well, Wheeler's voice cut through the darkness. Is this the cowboy, Miss Emma? His hand rested on his gun. Kavanaugh, isn't it? Heard you killed a man in Colorado. Self-defense, Jack said evenly. So you say. Wheeler's smile was poison, especially from a man who associates with questionable women. Jack moved so fast Emma barely saw it. One moment Wheeler was smirking, the next he was slammed against the wall, Jack's forearm at his throat. Jack, no! Emma screamed, grabbing his arm. This is what he wants. Jack stepped back. Wheeler straightened his coat, triumphant. Assaulting a federal marshal. That's prison time, Kavanaugh. Unless Miss Emma here wants to discuss a deal. My room. 1 hour. Something inside Emma snapped. 2 years of terror ignited into pure rage. No, she said, her voice ringing with newfound power. I'm done being afraid of men like you. You might want to reconsider. She said no. The new voice belonged to Sheriff Tom Morrison, who stood with 2 deputies. What I saw, Marshal, was you harassing a citizen. I've had several complaints. I think it's time you moved on. Wheeler's face flushed. This isn't over, he hissed at Emma. Some things follow you wherever you run. He stormed away. Emma sagged against Jack, who wrapped an arm around her. And for the first time, she didn't pull away. The next evening, the town gathered at the hotel. Wheeler stood before them, a yellowed paper in his hand. 3 years ago, a homestead near Topeka was attacked, he announced. The only witness, a young woman, disappeared. I have reason to believe that witness is here, living under a false name. His cold eyes found Emma. I believe she is Emily Hartford. But before Emma could speak, Mrs. Chen from the laundry stood up. I knew the Hartfords in Kansas. This isn't their daughter. Then the blacksmith stood. Knew them too. This ain't her. One by one, a dozen people stood, lying to protect her. Emma's eyes filled with tears. "You're all lying," Wheeler snarled. "And what is she?" Jack's voice was dangerously quiet. "Say it plain, Wheeler. She's a ruined woman who ran instead of seeing justice done." "Marshal," Sheriff Morrison's voice was cold as steel. "What kind of lawman hounds a victim? The kind that catches killers. Those men are still out there because she ran." "No." Emma's single word silenced the room. She stood, Jack rising with her. "They're not out there. They're dead. The cavalry killed them all." I watched from the root cellar. There was no trial because there was no one left to try. "She's lying." "She's not." The sheriff held up a telegram. "The Hartford case was closed 3 years ago. All perpetrators deceased." Wheeler's face was a mask of disbelief and fury. "Then why? Why run?" Emma looked him straight in the eye. "Because of men like you. Men who see a woman's pain as an opportunity." She took a breath. "Yes, I'm Emily Hartford. Yes, I survived. And yes, I ran. But I'm not running anymore. This is my home. These are my people. And you have no power here." Wheeler's hand dropped to his gun. In an instant, 20 guns in the room were aimed at him. He stormed out, his threats swallowed by the silence. Then the room erupted in applause. That night by the river, Emma reached out and touched Jack's face. "I'm not afraid anymore," she whispered. "Not of you." And she kissed him. It was a gentle, tentative kiss, but it was a beginning. But their peace was short-lived. The next night a gunshot echoed through the street. Emma ran to find Jack bleeding in the dust, Wheeler standing over him, a smoking pistol in his hand. Justice, it seemed, would have to be won one more time. Emma fell to her knees beside Jack, her hands pressing against the wound without hesitation. The blood was warm and terrifying, but her mind was clear. All her fear was gone, replaced by a cold, sharp focus. "You're touching me," Jack gasped, his face pale. "Don't you dare die on me, Jack Kavanaugh," she said fiercely. "Not now." The town swirled around them. Sheriff Morrison and his deputies dragged a screaming Wheeler away. Doc Williams pushed through the crowd. "Keep pressure on it, Emma." Just like that. They carried Jack into the hotel. Emma never let go, her hands clamped to his chest, her dress soaking with his blood. 2 years she had been afraid of touch, and now she couldn't bear to let him go. "The bullet's still in there," Doc Williams muttered. "Emma, I need you to—" "I'm not leaving." "I was going to say I need you to help." For the next hour Emma was no longer a waitress, but the healer her mother had taught her to be. Her hands were steady, her focus absolute as she assisted the doctor. Jack drifted in and out of consciousness, but each time his eyes opened, they found hers. "He's lost a lot of blood," Doc said when it was over. "The next day or two will tell." They moved Jack to Emma's room. She sat beside him, holding his hand, refusing to sleep. Through that first long night, she talked to him, telling him all the good memories she had buried with the bad. When dawn came, his fever broke. His eyes opened, clear and focused on her. "Told you," he whispered. "Told you I'd hold your heart first." Emma laughed through her tears. "I think I'm holding yours now, too." His recovery was slow, but steady. And through it all, Emma was there, touching him, holding him, caring for him with hands that were no longer agents of fear, but of healing and tenderness. "You've changed," Jack said one evening as she helped him back to bed. "I was so focused on what was taken from me," she said, taking his hand. "I forgot what I still had to give." She met his eyes. "Love, care, touch that heals instead of harms. You showed me that was possible." "Emma," Jack's voice was rough with emotion. "When I saw you in the street, all I could think was that I'd wasted so much time being afraid. Time we could have had." Jack pulled her closer with his good arm. Emma went willingly, resting her head on his shoulder. It was the closest they had ever been, and instead of panic, she felt only a profound sense of rightness, of coming home. "We have time now," Jack said into her hair. "All the time in the world." 6 months later, spring bloomed across the prairie. Wheeler was serving 20 years in a territorial prison. Jack's wound had healed, leaving a scar over his heart. Jack's freight company was thriving, and Emma was now part owner of the Grand Hotel. One morning, on a hill overlooking the valley, Jack took her hands. "Emma Hartley," he said, his voice serious, "you've taught me patience and shown me what real strength is. Will you trust me with your future? Will you marry me?" Tears of joy streamed down her face. "Yes, Jack Kavanaugh. Yes, I'll marry you." They were married 3 weeks later, with the whole town as their witness. Emma wore her mother's wedding dress. Jack stood at the altar, his eyes never leaving her as she walked down the aisle alone, choosing her own path. Sheriff Morrison officiated, speaking of courage and second chances. When it was time for their vows, Jack spoke from the heart. "I promised once that I'd hold your heart first. I swear to guard that precious gift all my days. I promise to stand beside you, not as your protector, but as your partner." Emma's voice was clear and strong. "Jack, you waited for me to find my way back to myself. I promise to match your courage with my own, and to never stop choosing you, every single day." When Morrison pronounced them married, Emma grabbed Jack's face and kissed him with a joyful certainty that brought the whole town to its feet. That night, Jack carried her over the threshold of the small house he had built for them. "Welcome home, Mrs. Kavanaugh." "Home?" Emma repeated, tasting the word. "It wasn't a place you ran to for safety. It was a place you built, with a person you chose." She traced the scar over his heart. "This is where I held you." "This is where you saved me," Jack corrected, pressing her hand flat against his chest. "We saved each other." Outside, the Wyoming wind whispered through the new grass. Inside, two people who had found their way through darkness rested in the peace of a love that was hard-won and freely given. The girl who was afraid to be touched had become a woman who knew that love, real love, was always worth the risk of reaching out. If you enjoyed this story of courage and redemption, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. Let us know in the comments where you're listening from today and what you thought of Emma and Jack's incredible journey. Your support helps us bring more stories from the Wild West to life.